Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I'm a cancer researcher and a visiting professor at a medical school teaching my specialty, medical imaging. While most people think it's just about taking medical images using MRI and CT scanners, a huge part of imaging involves complex image processing. Some days I feel more like a programmer than a doctor. Anyone who codes knows that programming is like handwriting. Everyone has their unique style. With enough experience, you can spot who wrote what code just by looking at it. Being 29 and new to the United States, with 2024 being my first year as a visiting professor, some students see me as this naive foreigner they can easily deceive. My module requires 2 reports worth 10% each of the final grade. These reports focus on image processing, requiring substantial coding work. Last week, while grading the October submissions, I noticed something interesting. A group of students had discovered reports from 2023 online and straight up copied them, just changing their names. I couldn't help but laugh because these reports weren't even good. They were full of basic errors. I'd actually reviewed past year's reports to set my grading standards, so I recognized them immediately. "Professor Jang, have you finished grading our reports yet?" One of the students, Mike Thompson, asked me in the hallway. "Still working on them," I replied with a neutral expression. "I really hope I did well," Mike continued, looking concerned. "I spent so many hours on those reports." I had to maintain my poker face, knowing his report had a 98% match on the plagiarism checker with a submission from last year. "The grades will be posted soon," I said simply. Mike persisted. "It's just that I didn't do great on the exam, and I really need these reports to pass." My blood was boiling, but I kept calm and formulated a plan. Since my exam was the last one of the fall semester, most students would head home for winter break while waiting for their grades. After grading everything, I noticed that 4 students who had cheated would barely fail even if I gave them 50% on their plagiarized reports. Perfect! I actually bumped up everyone else's grades slightly. Some students with poor but original reports managed to pass. They'd at least done their own work. "Professor, I just checked my grade online." Mike's email read the day grades were posted. "There must be some mistake with my report scores. Can we please schedule a review?" Similar emails came from the other 3 cheaters. They had to come in person. University policy. And they only had 3 days before grades locked. Also policy. "Sorry, but online reviews aren't possible," I replied to their desperate requests for virtual meetings. "It must be in person." They all scrambled to return from their vacations. Mike cut short his trip to Hawaii, another flew back from Colorado, and 2 took long bus rides from neighboring states. When Mike walked into my office, trying to look confident, I started our review. "Let's look at this section of your code," I said, pointing to a particularly problematic part. "Can you explain your thinking here?" Well, he struggled to explain someone else's work. For 3 hours, I meticulously went through every error, every poor design choice, every inefficient algorithm. When he tried to leave, I reminded him, "We need to complete the full review process, university policy." The same scene played out with each student. Their smug expressions gradually transformed into despair as they realized I knew exactly what they'd done. "See you next semester," I called out cheerfully as they left, knowing they'd have to retake my class. The best part, they'd wasted their vacation time, spent money on travel, and still failed. Sometimes justice comes with a lesson in patience. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never expected to end up in a heated battle with an homeowners association that I wasn't even part of, but here we are. This whole saga started about 6 months ago when I bought my dream house in a nice suburban neighborhood. The property had everything I wanted: great location, beautiful landscaping, and most importantly, an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Hendersons, had lived there for over 30 years. They maintained the property meticulously and the pool was in pristine condition. During the purchase process, they mentioned that while most of the neighborhood was part of an homeowners association, they had opted out when it was first established in 1992. They showed me the documentation proving their opt-out, which had been properly filed with the county. I made sure my real estate attorney reviewed everything to confirm the house wasn't subject to homeowners association restrictions. The first couple months after moving in were great. I enjoyed my pool almost daily during the summer, often having friends over for weekend barbecues. That's when the trouble started. One Saturday afternoon in July, while I was hosting a small pool party, a woman marched into my backyard through the side gate. She didn't even bother knocking or announcing herself. "Excuse me," she said in that passive-aggressive tone that just screams Karen, "but you're in violation of several homeowners association regulations right now." I looked up from my lounge chair confused. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" I'm Linda Matthews, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. You have too many guests using the pool. You're playing music too loudly, and those pool floats are not an approved color or style. I sat up and removed my sunglasses. Miss Matthews, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This property isn't part of the Homeowners Association. The previous owners opted out years ago. Her face turned red. That's impossible. Every home in Oak Ridge Estates is required to be part of the association. Actually, no, I have the documentation showing the Hendersons opted out when the Homeowners Association was formed. My attorney reviewed everything during the purchase. Well, that opt-out would have expired when the property changed hands. You're required to join the Homeowners Association as a new owner. I shook my head. That's not how it works. The opt-out runs with the land. I inherited the same legal status as the previous owners. We'll see about that, she snapped before storming off. A few days later, I received a certified letter from the Homeowners Association's lawyer claiming I was in violation of multiple regulations and demanding I pay $2,500 in fines. They also ordered me to immediately cease using my pool until I brought it into compliance with their rules. I sent the letter to my real estate attorney, who responded with a firmly worded letter explaining that I wasn't subject to Homeowners Association jurisdiction and demanding they cease harassment. She included copies of all the relevant documentation showing the valid opt-out. Instead of backing down, they escalated. The next weekend, I found a padlock on my pool gate with a notice saying the pool had been closed by order of the Homeowners Association Board. I called the police to report the trespassing and vandalism. When the officers arrived, Linda and 2 other board members showed up to argue their case. We have every right to secure that pool, Linda insisted to the officers. It's a safety hazard that violates our regulations. My attorney had advised me to record all interactions, so I had my phone camera running. Officer, I have documentation proving this property isn't under Homeowners Association jurisdiction. They're trespassing and damaging my property. The police reviewed my paperwork and told the Homeowners Association representatives they needed to remove the lock immediately. Linda argued but eventually complied when the officers warned her she could be cited for criminal trespassing. As soon as the police left, Linda got in my face. This isn't over. That pool is a nuisance and a liability. We'll shut it down one way or another. Every time you trespass or damage my property, I'll press charges, I warned her. And I'll sue the Homeowners Association for harassment. Over the next few weeks, they tried everything to make my life miserable. They sent daily violation notices with escalating fines. They took photos of my property and pool area from the street. They even tried to claim my pool pump was too noisy and violated city ordinances. I documented everything and kept building my case. I also installed security cameras covering my entire property after catching some of the board members trying to sneak into my backyard multiple times. The situation came to a head when they filed a lawsuit trying to force me to join the Homeowners Association. Their lawyer argued that the original opt-out wasn't valid and that safety concerns about my pool gave them authority to intervene. Fortunately, I had an ace up my sleeve. While researching the property history, my attorney discovered that in 1995, the Homeowners Association had actually tried to challenge the Hendersons' opt-out in court. They lost that case, with the judge explicitly ruling that the opt-out was valid and binding on future owners. This set a clear legal precedent. We filed a motion to dismiss their lawsuit, citing the previous case. We also countersued for harassment, trespassing, and legal fees. The judge was not impressed with the Homeowners Association's arguments. Miss Matthews, the judge said during the hearing, your organization already litigated this exact issue and lost. The court's ruling was clear. This property is not subject to Homeowners Association jurisdiction. Your repeated attempts to force compliance and harass the homeowner are concerning. The Homeowners Association's lawyer tried to argue that times had changed and safety standards were different now. The judge wasn't having it. The legal principle remains the same, she stated firmly. The original opt-out was properly executed and runs with the land. This court grants the motion to dismiss. Furthermore, I'm issuing an injunction barring the Homeowners Association from any further attempts to exercise authority over this property. I thought that would be the end of it, but Linda and her cronies weren't done yet. They started encouraging other neighbors to complain about my pool parties to the city. They claimed my guests were parking illegally and making too much noise, so I got proactive. I met with all my immediate neighbors, except the Homeowners Association board members, and gave them my contact information. I asked them to let me know directly if they ever had concerns about noise or parking. Most were actually very friendly, and admitted the Homeowners Association had been pressuring them to complain. Linda's been on a power trip ever since she became president, my next-door neighbor told me. She tried to fine me $100 because my roses were the wrong shade of red. Most of us are sick of it. I also reached out to other homeowners who'd had issues with the Homeowners Association. Turns out there was a lot of discontent with the current board's aggressive tactics. Several people had been hit with questionable fines and enforcement actions. One resident, Tom, had been fined $500 because his Christmas lights were supposedly too bright. Another, Maria, was threatened with liens because her front door color wasn't on the approved list, even though it was painted that color when she bought the house. "We need change," Tom said during a gathering at my house. "The board is out of control." So we organized. I offered my infamous pool area as a meeting space for residents who wanted to discuss homeowners association reform. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Soon, we had regular strategy sessions with dozens of homeowners attending. We researched the homeowners association bylaws and found multiple violations by the current board. They hadn't held required meetings, failed to properly notify residents of rule changes, and weren't following their own procedures for issuing fines. Linda caught wind of our meetings and tried to declare them unauthorized gatherings in violation of homeowners association rules. But since my property wasn't under their jurisdiction, there was nothing she could do about it. The final straw came when we discovered the board had been mismanaging homeowners association funds. They'd been using community money to pay for personal legal consultations and had awarded maintenance contracts to companies owned by board members' relatives without proper bidding. Armed with this information, we called for a special election. The bylaws allowed for removal of board members if enough homeowners petitioned for a vote. We easily gathered the required signatures. The election meeting was tense. Linda tried to invalidate some of the signatures and postpone the vote, but too many homeowners were present and demanding action. When the votes were counted, the entire board was voted out. "This is a witch hunt!" Linda shouted as the results were announced. "We've kept this neighborhood pristine for years. You'll regret this when property values plummet." The new board, led by Tom as president, took a much more reasonable approach. They reduced unnecessary restrictions, lowered dues, and implemented transparent financial practices. They even apologized to me officially for the harassment. "On behalf of the Homeowners Association, we acknowledge that your property is not under our jurisdiction," Tom stated in a formal letter. "We regret the actions of the previous board and have instructed our attorneys to drop all pending legal matters." The cherry on top? Linda put her house up for sale a month later, claiming the neighborhood was going downhill. I made sure to wave cheerfully from my pool as she moved out. That was 3 months ago. These days, I still enjoy my pool parties, but now many of my neighbors join in. Properly invited, of course. We've actually built a real community, not just one ruled by arbitrary restrictions and power-tripping board members. Last week, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue, partly to celebrate 6 months of the new Homeowners Association board. Tom raised his glass in a toast. "To the pool that started a revolution." I learned some valuable lessons through all this. First, always keep good records and know your rights. Second, when faced with bullies, standing firm can inspire others to stand up too. And finally, sometimes the best way to deal with toxic people is to simply outlast them while building a stronger community around you. The funny thing is, my pool parties are actually quieter now than they were during the fight. Without the constant stress of homeowners association harassment, there's no need to prove a point. My neighbors know they can talk to me directly about any concerns, and I respect their peace and quiet. I still keep all the documentation about the homeowners association opt-out in a safe place, just in case. But with the new board in place and Linda gone, I doubt I'll need it again. The security cameras stay up, though. They've proven useful for more than just homeowners association surveillance. Last month, they caught some teenagers trying to sneak a midnight swim. Oh, and remember those unapproved pool floats that started all this drama? I bought extras in even brighter colors. They're now a neighborhood favorite during our community pool parties. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and helping create the kind of community you want to live in. As for Linda, I heard she moved to a neighborhood without an homeowners association. Apparently, she couldn't handle living under someone else's rules. Ironic, isn't it? The new Homeowners Association Board has become a model for other communities in the area. They've shown that reasonable rules, transparent governance, and respect for property rights can actually improve property values more than aggressive enforcement ever did. Several nearby neighborhoods have reached out for advice on reforming their own homeowners associations. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for Linda's crusade against my pool. Without her overreach, we might never have discovered the financial mismanagement or built such a strong community. Sometimes the worst adversaries inadvertently lead to the best outcomes. My attorney framed a copy of the judge's injunction against the old Homeowners Association board. It hangs in my home office as a reminder that standing up for your rights, while difficult, is always worth it. And yes, I can see my pool from my office window, still the perfect shade of non-Homeowners Association approved blue. Update. 1 year later. I promised some folks I'd update on how things turned out a year after the whole Homeowners Association pool saga, and there have been some interesting developments worth sharing. First off, our neighborhood has absolutely thrived under the new Homeowners Association leadership. Property values have actually increased more than surrounding areas, completely debunking Linda's dire predictions. Turns out, having a reasonable Homeowners Association that focuses on genuine community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement makes a neighborhood more attractive to buyers. Who knew? Remember those financial irregularities we discovered? Well, that story didn't end with just voting the old board out. The new board hired an independent auditor to go through all the Homeowners Association's books, and what they found wasn't pretty. Over the past 5 years, there had been nearly $50,000 in questionable expenses and improperly awarded contracts. The new board had a duty to the homeowners to recover these funds, so they pursued legal action against the former board members. Linda and her crew tried to claim everything was just administrative oversights, but the paper trail was pretty clear. Last month, they agreed to a settlement rather than face a court battle. Each former board member had to repay their share of the misused funds. The settlement money is being used to upgrade the neighborhood's actual community pool. Yes, there is one, making their obsession with my private pool even more ridiculous. Tom and the new board put it to a community vote to decide how to use the funds, something the old board never would have done. As for Linda, she's having trouble in her new neighborhood too. One of my former neighbors keeps in touch with her sister, who lives near Linda's new place. Apparently, she tried to start a petition to establish an homeowners association there. It failed spectacularly when her potential neighbors Googled her name and found news articles about our situation. The internet never forgets. My pool has become something of a symbol in the neighborhood. The new board even incorporated a pool image into the redesigned community newsletter, a little inside joke that everyone appreciates. We now have regular community events that rotate between willing hosts, including my place. It's all properly scheduled and coordinated with reasonable quiet hours and parking arrangements that everyone happily follows without need for threats or fines. There was one more amusing twist. Remember those companies owned by the former board members' relatives that got all the maintenance contracts? One of them tried to sue the Homeowners Association when their contract wasn't renewed. That backfired spectacularly when our attorneys discovered they'd been charging us nearly double the market rate for basic services. They dropped the suit pretty quickly when we threatened to countersue and report them to the state contractors board. The security cameras I installed during the conflict have stayed useful. We've created an optional neighborhood watch program, and several other residents have installed similar systems. Unlike the old board's surveillance tactics, this is about actual security, not catching people with unapproved mailbox colors. Last month, we had our first annual neighborhood pool party circuit, a single day where several homes with pools, including mine, hosted open houses for the community. It was a huge success and perfectly legal since everyone was properly invited, and we coordinated everything to manage noise and parking. The old board would have had a collective aneurysm over it, but that's what made it even more enjoyable. I've had several people ask me if I would consider joining the Homeowners Association voluntarily now that it's well run. I politely decline each time. While I fully support what Tom and the new board are doing, keeping my independence has become a matter of principle. Plus, it's a good reminder to future boards that they don't have absolute power over everyone in the neighborhood. The whole experience has taught me that sometimes fighting back against unreasonable authority isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about creating positive change for an entire community. By standing firm on my rights, I helped spark a transformation that made our neighborhood a better place for everyone. Those unauthorized pool floats, they're still here, brighter than ever. But now they're just pool floats, not symbols of defiance. That's probably the best victory of all. We've moved from conflict to community, from rules to relationships, from pettiness to progress. And every time I take a swim in my still very much mine pool, I smile thinking about how one small stand against overreach led to such positive changes for so many people. Sometimes the best ripple effects start right in your own backyard. The next one is a malicious compliances story. This is my father's story, not mine. My father and his friend were doing a course which required them to adhere to some corporate standards. A little background. Both of them already had well-paying jobs. They were just doing this course for enhancing knowledge and not for any other gain. The course was divided into phases, and this particular one was for 18 days. You were only allowed one leave, and if you took more than that, you had to redo the entire thing. Our city was around 2 hours away from the course center, and they traveled daily to and fro to attend it. They mostly tried to be early, but this one day there was unusually high traffic and they were much delayed. As a result, they were around 10-15 minutes late. When they reached the location at around 10:15, they were informed by the course supervisor, CS, that they would be marked absent for the half day. They both protested, stating their reason for lateness, and also that the class had not even started. But their appeals were dismissed. The irony? The lecturer himself was delayed by traffic, and the class didn't begin until well after 11. They were both frustrated for having a half day marked absent for no reason. So at 5 that day, they stood up in the middle of the ongoing lecture, packed their bags, and started leaving the class. The lecturer was confused, and the course supervisor was enraged. He asked them what were they doing. They replied, "Following the protocol. If we are expected to arrive exactly at 10, we should be able to leave at 5 too." Apparently, the course supervisor wasn't prepared for someone to follow their own rules to the letter. The CS began shouting at them that you can't leave before the lecture ends, I will mark you absent for the full day, etc., but they just left. They got calls from the CS and other persons threatening to remove them from the course. As I said, my father already had a job, so he wasn't much bothered by the threats, and same with his friend. They went next day at exactly 10, ignored the CS and his warnings, and left at 5 that day too. The other students began following their example and left at 5 too, which led to the institute paying extra to the lecturers as they had to invite them the next day as well to continue the class. There isn't much more to it as the course was only for 18 days and they both passed with flying colors. This story came out of nowhere a few days ago and I couldn't stop myself from posting it here, however small the MC. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.